Okay, so we're still looking at the elements and principles of design. We're going to be creating a composition that uses shape as the main focus for element. And what we want to do is figure out at least one or two principles that go along with our shape to create an interesting composition. So what I've done is I've taken some students' work from the past, and we're going to look at that and see where it would fall under which principles of design we think it's the strongest. So down here I have the definition of each of the principles of design. We start with the element shape, and we're doing these construction cutouts using a white piece of paper of construction paper and a black piece of paper. At the very end, we're going to add one that's color. But for now, we're just thinking about the black and white. And the problem that they had to solve was to take black and white and make it as even as possible, to have good craftsmanship in their cutting out of the paper, and then creating a composition that's interesting to the eye through using the principles of design. So if we look at this one and you think about all the principles that it could go under, I think it could go under several of them, and you could make an argument for each one. But for this one, I think mainly it's the emphasis. Like my eye definitely goes to this red spot right here because it's an interesting shape that they've cut out. So they didn't just cut out one single red dot. They actually had some openings in it to create some movement inside there and kind of create some movement going into that dead center of the white. They also did a really nice job of the rule of thirds. And if you remember, the rule of thirds is where you visually make a tic-tac-toe board across your piece, and the emphasis or focal point should fall on one of those intersections. So it's not dead center in the piece, it's over to the right a little bit or the left and up or down just a little bit. And you only want one focal point. So on this piece, I would say this one kind of falls under emphasis. And the definition of emphasis is refers to the use of visual elements to draw attention to a certain area, usually a focal point in an artwork. And I think they did a really nice job. They also used these kind of paisley flower petals to pull your eye upward and then downward to these larger ones. And then these guys kind of bring my eye back towards the center. So they did a really nice job. So I would take this one and I would put it in emphasis. So I'm going to take my box here and I'm going to insert image into cell, and then I'm going to find that image and drag it into here. Okay, so now we have one square done. So now we're looking for something that has shape and balance. Out of all of these, again, you can make an argument for several of them, but I feel this one is one of the strongest for balance, mainly because it's actually two different types of balance. It could be asymmetrical or symmetrical. The way that these squares go off of the paper, your eye continues to fill in that drawing, right? So if you look at it, you know visually that this is going to go up, off the paper, and then back down onto the paper. So you know exactly where the viewer or the artist wants the viewer to go. They also did a really good job of making sure that each of these lines were equal. So it creates this movement inward or outward depending on which way you're looking at it. So I could cut this right down the center here and it'd be very symmetrical because again my eyes are going off. Or I could look at the composition as a whole when I do the rule of thirds, and if I cut it in half, it's asymmetrical because most of it is on the right hand side. So I think this does a really good job of balance. So I'm going to put it here where the definition is relation to each other within the composition in terms of their visual weight to create visual equilibrium. So I'm going to click inside this box, and then I'm going to insert image into cell. And then all I have to do is take the image I want and drag it over. And then we have our balance box. So then when we can look at another one, if I pull this one up, so this one, again, trying to get to the rule of thirds, they're a little bit far right over here. Like I would say this is closer to rule of thirds. Kind of brings your eye off the page a little bit too much. So you want to try and keep it closer to here, but it definitely brings your eye to here. But it's not too distracting or creating too much of an emphasis. But I think by also creating this blue dot in the center, they've created this feel of water. It's almost like a splash to me, creating this movement across the page. So either the rock or whatever dropped into the water and it splashed outward, or maybe it's kind of splashing inward and moving towards this way. I think the black, the negative space, helps it because it gives that like feeling of waves or moving inward. So they did a really nice job. So I'm going to put it into my movement. And then I'm going to go into Insert, Image, into Cell. So we're going to put that there. So this one I think was interesting. This one to me creates kind of the rhythm, which is kind of hard to define sometimes. But rhythm here refers to the movement or the visual flow within a certain piece. And to me, the way that they've repeated this, it kind of makes it feel like a song to me, or maybe feels like bars. So it's kind of just a repetition. And then it kind of gives a little bit of a distance there and then goes back to the same rhythm again. So I think this falls into rhythm. Remember that with the rule of thirds, it's just a rule to art, and you can break rules, just like in life. But if you're going to break a rule, you want to break it really, really well and make it worth it. So this person kind of broke the rule by putting this red piece kind of dead center. But they did a good job because I feel like it still moves my eye through the page, and then I go back to the beginning again, and it kind of moves my eye through. So again, I think this one makes a strong rhythm argument. So I'm going to put that into my cell. And drag that there. So I'm going to pull up this one. This one they did a nice job of varying the different shapes. So they have some circles in here, they have some triangles, but then they also pull your eye to this red dot in the center. But again, it's not dead center. So it kind of gives you that off balance there, a little bit of interest. I think they did a good job of contrasting colors. Obviously, most of these are contrasting with the black and white, but they also did a nice even job of white and black. And then they also contrast the shapes. So they have circles, which are kind of soft round shapes, against these hard edge triangles, but they still work together. So they did a really good job of making a contrast of shapes. So I'm going to put that one right here in contrast. Again, you can make the argument that several of these will fit in different principles of design, which just adds interest to the piece. If you have a piece that has several principles, then it's a strong piece. Okay, so scale and proportion. This is the relationship between the dimensions of different elements, size, and how parts of the composition relate to each other. So I'm going to pull up this one because I think they did an interesting job of making it seem like it's kind of foreshortening, like this is closer to me, but then these, as they move out, get larger. And then they have just one large color here. Again, it's in the rule of thirds, so my eye starts here and it goes out. But the way that they've spread these apart, it kind of makes it seem like this is bigger and this is smaller only because of the relationship of where it is on the paper. So I think they did a good job of proportion. So I'm going to put that one in scale and proportion. Again, just drop it right into the browser. And that one will go there. Okay, so variety. I think this one shows an interesting variety. They definitely have all different shapes on here. It's not all one uniform shape repeated over and over again. They have some shapes that are actual named shapes like arrows. This looks like a star. This kind of looks like a person here with a head, maybe a dancing figure. But the way that they've cut up these pieces and the sharp angles, they still go together, but it's a variety of shapes. So it's all different things going on. Here's one of the rules that they broke. For this project, I'm asking you guys just to use one color. They actually used yellow here, and then they put a little bit of yellow on each of those arrows pointing towards that yellow. It definitely brings your eye to this. So again, it's one of those rules that they break, but you have to break it really well, otherwise it'll hurt you in the long run. So again, I think this fits well with variety. So I'm going to go into the variety square, image, insert, drag and drop. Pattern. So pattern, a lot of these have different types of patterns. I think this one is the one that I'm going to use for a pattern, just because even though it's not over and over and over again the same exact pattern, they went inside each other. So like they created this square and then they created another square inside of that one. And then if you look at this black, it's similar to this white. So it's kind of like a pattern in a pattern. The same with the triangle inside there, and the triangle inside here. And they just kind of repeated some of those patterns over and over again. Again, a lot of these have strong patterns. For example, this one has a strong pattern. I just felt it fit into the balance better. So I'm going to put this one into pattern. Remember that your craftsmanship is extremely important in all your projects. You're going to make sure that every time you cut paper, you cut nice and clean, crisp cuts. You want to use a nice sharp pair of scissors. And you want to glue it down nice and evenly with no excess glue. All right, so the last one I think is probably the most interesting, unity. So when you're looking at a piece, does the whole piece work well together? The definition of unity is the arrangement of different pieces producing the harmonious, balance, and complete whole. So you have to think about, is the whole piece working together? And again, I think all of these are really strong ones so they could fit. But this is one that I really feels together, that I feel like it works really well together. So you have this really thin movement here, kind of connected to the red circle that's, again, perfectly in the rule of thirds. And then you have these little shapes coming off of it. It kind of reminds you of something you might see in nature. And then if you squint your eyes, it has a nice balance between whites and blacks. So they did a good job balancing the whites and blacks. The craftsmanship was nice and tight. And then they did break a rule here by adding a little bit more of a red piece. Again, I think they broke it well, so it worked out. I like how they have the composition coming off of the paper there and off the paper here, but you know visually with your eye where you're going. So I think it's a nice, strong piece, and it shows unity. So I'm going to put it right here in this block. And there's our shapes that fit with each one of the principles of design. So when you're designing your piece, really think about how your shape is going to fit with the principle of design you choose. Think about the rule of thirds, and think about the composition being equally balanced between whites and blacks, and think about your craftsmanship.